I'm currently in the Azure. I'm currently in the Azure portal. So you can see here we have one virtual machine in our environment, and this is actually one of the things that if you're working with Cloud Shell, you'll run into this one with quite frequently, because the idea of Cloud Shell is it doesn't matter how much you use it, but it's meant for interactive use. So the moment you're connected to Cloud Shell, you have an open WebSocket connection. So you have an open connection that will take in these commands. But if you've been idle for anywhere in between 10 or 30 minutes, you'll get this timeout message. It says 20 minutes, but sometimes it's a bit sooner. And that might also be because there might have been a disruption in your connectivity. So the first thing we'll do is we'll reconnect to the Cloud Shell. You can see over here that I have PowerShell selected, and we're already authenticated against Azure. So one of the features is that we have a Cloud Drive, and your Cloud Drive is just an Azure storage account, so you can access this from any way. And if we take a look at what we have in here, you can see we have linux.tf, we have the terraform.tf state. So I mentioned before, Terraform tracks its state by creating state files. And what we'll go into is we'll go and take a look into this configuration file, and it will automatically bring us to one of the features of Cloud Shell is that we actually have a VS Code web version available here. So what I can do is I can just type code dot, so that will open, if you would run this on your local system, this would open VS Code on your in the current path. And it does the same when we do this in Azure Cloud Shell. So we can see here we have a .terraform folder, Cloud Console, but also linux.tf. So we'll go into this file and we'll go take a look at what kind of resources we have defined here. So we can see that I want to create a resource group. I want to create a virtual network. My virtual network needs a subnet. We need an IP address. We need to have a way of accessing our network. So what kind of security rules are we going to put on there? Configuration for the interface, and then all the way down, we also specify which SSH key we're using. So because this is a Linux VM, so we want to be able to authenticate against it without a username and password. And the way we do this is by using a key pair, a public key and private key. So having this configuration, let's see what we can do with this when we're using PowerShell, when we're using Terraform, in this case in PowerShell. So I'll clear out the console. So the first thing I'll do is I'll run Terraform init to ensure that all the resources, all the providers that we need are going to be there. So we can see it's now initializing the provider plugins. If this would in fact be the first time I run this, or it's a system that has never done anything with Azure VM, it will reach out to the GitHub repository and will pull these providers in. So then the next step was, okay, let's run Terraform plan. Let's see what kind of changes will be made here. So we run the plan. It will take a couple of seconds because it will analyze what we actually have in Azure, but it will also check what is in the configuration file. So that's what's happening in the background now. And at the end of this, we'll get a list of all the changes that are going to be made. So the way that is indicated, we can see the plus here, and the plus indicates that it's going to be a new resource. And if it's a minus there, it will mean something will be removed. So when will something be removed? Well, if, for example, I'll just go back to the initial example I gave. We want to have an end state of 5 virtual machines. If we, for some reason, have 7 of those, if we would run Terraform plan against that, it will say, okay, we have 7 now, our end state is 5, so we'll remove 2 of those resources. So another thing we can see here, we get a warning. So we can see that one of the things that we're using, so address prefix, is in fact deprecated, and we should use the address prefixes instead. So this is where Cloud Shell is quite useful, because we can just run code again, can take a look at our configuration file, and we can look for address prefix. It's already put there. And the suggestion is, okay, we should use address prefixes. So put the ES back there. And I happen to know that the way this is formatted is also different than address prefix used to be. So in this case, we just have a single string here, but we need it to be an array of strings. And the way we define that is by putting the brackets around it. So we still have the same value, but we're using the new definition. So I'll press save. I'll quit out of here. Clear my screen. I'll run Terraform plan again. And while this is going on, our warning should be gone now. And because the warning is no longer there, I feel secure enough that this is going to work as intended, and we'll be able to deploy our resource this way. So deploying a resource with Terraform was Terraform apply. And it will now come with exactly the same information that we got with Terraform plan. The big difference is going to be that we'll get an option to actually apply this. So here it asks us, do we really want to perform these actions? And in this case, we will say yes. It's of course also possible to auto approve or to force Terraform to just run, because you don't always want this to be interactive. Actually, in most cases, you wouldn't want this to be interactive, but for demo purposes or when you are using it interactively, I would never advise you to run -force, because if for some reason there's something unexpected in your configuration files, you might end up deleting more than you intended or spinning up a lot more resources than you thought you would. So I press yes here. So this will take a little bit of time, but what we expect to happen is, this is why I'm doing this from the Azure portal, is we would expect a virtual machine to start showing up here. And this will take a little bit of time. So while this is deploying, what I'll do is I'll show another feature of Azure Cloud Shell, and something that actually makes it really simple to work with Cloud Shell is there's also an Azure Drive available. And what this does is it gives you access to your Azure account and all your subscriptions in there, and you can kind of browse it like a file system. So this is only if you're using PowerShell, because this is using what's called a PowerShell drive. So you can see now we're in home, my home drive, my cloud drive, but we can also switch over to Azure colon. So if we switch over to here, I know that my Azure subscription starts with Azure, so I can tab. They have the same name, so that's Microsoft Azure sponsorship is the one I want to be in. So I do another dir, and what we can see is we can just browse through Azure. So we can see we have all resources, we have resource groups, we have virtual machines. So in this case, I'll go into resource groups. And if I take a look here, I can see that my resource group is actually in there. And we can also see that the Cloud Shell storage is also listed as a resource group here. So the advantage of this is that it's also context aware. So if you would be using any of the Azure PowerShell commandlets or PowerShell functions in the console, it will run it from the context we are in. So if you have multiple subscriptions or multiple resource groups, the moment I would deploy a resource now, it would be in the location I'm in right now. So currently I'm not in a resource group, but I am in this specific subscription. So we get to be work with it like a file system. So if I say new VM when I'm in this case my resource group, I would do new VM, then the VM would be created in this space. Has nothing to do with Terraform, but it's a cool feature. And with that, we can switch back over to here, and we can now see that the VM has indeed deployed and it is currently running. So let's verify that with Terraform. So I will run Terraform plan again. So we can see what will happen if we would actually apply this configuration again. And what we expect to see here is that there will be no changes because everything is exactly as we applied it about 5 minutes ago. So this will once again take a couple of seconds. You can see it's refreshing the state. So refreshing the state is it's checking what is in the state file and it's comparing that to what is actually running in Azure. And it says no changes, infrastructure is up to date. So this is exactly the end state we want to be in. But because I'm a good citizen and I like to clean up after myself, what I'll do is I'll run Terraform deploy. And before I do that, I'll take a look at help, because I'm very sure of myself that I want to destroy this. And we can see that if I don't want to say yes, if I'm very sure this has to go, we can use force, which is deprecated, or dash auto approve. So in this case, I will use auto approve. And if I run this, everything will be cleaned up again and will be in the state before I started giving this demo.